In a world obsessed with size and status, there's something magnetic about a machine that refuses to play by those rules. A small box on wheels that laughs in the face of bloat and overcomplication. You see it perched on rocky ridges, splattered in mud, dwarfed by the very landscapes it conquers. It doesn't whisper luxury, it shouts purpose. Every dent tells a story, every mile feels earned. It's the kind of vehicle that reminds you driving used to mean more than touchscreen menus and voice commands. It meant movement, grit, and a sense of freedom. And somewhere between nostalgia and necessity, it's found a way to turn minimalism into magic. But what happens when that same simplicity is both its strength and its biggest threat? That's where our story begins, with a legend that proves small can still be mighty. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us which icon you want to see next. The Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5. Auto may look like a throwback, but every inch of it carries a deliberate philosophy. Function first, frills nowhere in sight. To understand how this tiny 4x4 came to define defiance, you have to rewind to a time when off-roaders were tools, not toys. The Jimny lineage stretches back to the late 1960s, when Suzuki set out to build a lightweight, go-anywhere vehicle for Japan's narrow backroads and rural terrain. It wasn't designed to impress city dwellers. It was meant for farmers, foresters, and anyone whose life depended on reaching places maps forgot. That utilitarian DNA never left. Over decades, as other manufacturers chased bigger engines and fancier interiors, Suzuki kept the Jimny small, square, and simple. By the time the 1.5 SZ5 Auto arrived, the world had moved on, or thought it had. The SUV had become a status symbol, more about comfort than capability, and the average American crossover weighed as much as two Jimnys combined. Against that backdrop, the Jimny wasn't just a product. It was a protest. Suzuki's decision to build the 1.5 SZ5 Auto the way it did wasn't nostalgia, it was necessity. The company knew it couldn't compete with the giants on sheer power or luxury, so it doubled down on authenticity. The boxy silhouette wasn't retro for retro's sake. It was the most space-efficient way to fit a ladder frame chassis, live axles, and proper off-road geometry under a compact shell. That choice defined everything else. The high bonnet, upright glass, and flat panels made it easy to repair, cheap to paint, and durable against the elements. The SZ5 trim added just enough comfort, climate control, navigation, heated seats to make daily driving tolerable without diluting its purpose. Inside, the vibe was more workshop than lounge. Hard plastics you could hose off. Switches designed to be operated with gloves. Even the automatic gearbox, a 4-speed unit in an era of 9 and 10-speed marvels, was chosen for simplicity and reliability, not bragging rights. The result? A vehicle that felt refreshingly honest in an industry addicted to exaggeration. You didn't climb into the Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto to be pampered. You climbed in to participate. Its 1.5-liter naturally aspirated engine produced a modest 100 horsepower, but paired with a body that weighed barely over a ton, it was enough. The low-range transfer case turned steep climbs and slippery trails into playgrounds. On the road, it felt bouncy, sometimes even crude, but that was part of its charm. Every input was direct, every imperfection unfiltered. Driving it was like stepping back into an era when vehicles didn't try to hide what they were. Still, that purity came at a cost. The Jimny's short wheelbase and tall stance made it jittery at highway speeds. Wind noise drowned out conversation. Fuel economy, though decent for a 4x4, couldn't match the latest hybrids. And in markets obsessed with refinement, those traits seemed unforgivable. Yet Suzuki didn't back down. The company understood something the market had forgotten. Not everyone wanted a rolling living room. Some wanted adventure distilled to its essence. That realization turned the Jimny from niche curiosity to cult favorite. The 1.5 SZ5 Auto marked a key turning point in that story. It bridged two worlds, one foot in analog past, the other in digital present. The inclusion of automatic transmission opened the door to new buyers who loved the look and capability, but didn't want to wrestle with a clutch. It also made the Jimny more accessible for urban dwellers. Ironically, the very audience it was never designed to court. Suddenly, city streets were dotted with these tiny boxes in bright yellow, khaki green or granite gray, their drivers smiling like they'd discovered a secret. That secret was the same one Suzuki had guarded for 50 years. Authenticity sells. But there was another layer. Behind the nostalgia and rugged charm, the Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto represented an engineering tightrope. Every component had to justify its place. Adding weight meant compromising agility. Upgrading emission systems risked choking performance. Even the body dimensions were dictated by Japanese K-car roots, where tax benefits and road regulations favored smallness. That discipline forged a clarity of purpose few automakers can sustain today. To own one was to join a tribe. Forums and online groups buzzed with photos of Jimnys tackling trails that full-size rigs feared. Accessories exploded. Roof racks, snorkels, mini bull bars, all scaled down but serious in intent. Yet for all the community energy, Suzuki faced a bigger challenge, meeting global emissions and safety standards without betraying the formula. When the EU tightened CO2 limits, Suzuki had to pull the standard Jimny from some markets, reintroducing it later as a commercial vehicle with no rear seats to sidestep regulations. That move angered some fans, but it also underscored how fragile purity had become in a rule-heavy automotive world. Through it all, the Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto kept doing what it did best, staying true to its mission. You could argue it was never meant for mainstream success. It was meant to remind us that vehicles can have character without complication, that freedom on four wheels doesn't need a touchscreen tutorial. Every bolt and panel carried the weight of Suzuki's stubborn refusal to compromise, and that refusal made it iconic. But the story doesn't stop there. The Jimny's rise from humble off-roader to global cult hero didn't happen by accident. It was a rebellion against everything the modern SUV had become. To see how far that rebellion went, we need to look at how the world reacted once this little box on wheels started outshining the giants built to replace it. When the Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto arrived in showrooms, few expected it to spark a phenomenon. Yet somehow this squat, square 100 horsepower box became the talk of the SUV world. In markets where automotive fashion ruled, where screens replaced switches and size implied status, the Jimny's unapologetic simplicity felt radical. Reviewers called it a toy, enthusiasts called it a tool, and buyers called their dealers begging for one. Waiting lists stretched months. In some regions, used examples sold above retail. The irony was thick. The cheapest, most basic 4x4 Suzuki built had become a cult luxury item. The Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto thrived precisely because it didn't pretend to be more than it was. Owners celebrated its honesty. No fake vents, no fake exhaust tips, no fake anything. It wasn't trying to outmuscle rivals or outshine them with chrome. It was about connection between driver, terrain, and machine. That connection was something crossovers had polished out in their pursuit of comfort. For Suzuki, this response validated decades of consistency. For the rest of the industry, it was a wake-up call. The Jimny's success revealed a growing fatigue with automotive excess. People weren't just buying a small 4x4. They were buying a statement. Social feeds filled with photos of Jimnys perched on mountain roads, roof tents unfolded, dogs hanging out the windows. Influencers adopted them as symbols of authenticity, while rural owners saw them as trusty companions. Two groups with nothing in common, urban minimalists and off-road purists, suddenly found themselves united by a 1.5-liter engine and a boxy shell. But not everyone was cheering. Regulators eyed its emissions numbers, and safety testers frowned at its compact crumple zones. Some critics dismissed it as outdated, an analog stubbornness out of sync with the electric revolution. Suzuki responded with pragmatism, tweaking where it could without eroding character. It added mild hybrid systems in some markets, reinforced the chassis, and improved driver aids, all while keeping the core intact. Yet that balancing act exposed the tension at the heart of the Jimny story. Could purity survive progress? The Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto also forced buyers to confront the real meaning of SUV. Most modern sport utility vehicles rarely see mud deeper than a puddle. The Jimny, however, was happiest where traction ran out. With its ladder frame, low-range transfer case, and approach and departure angles that shamed vehicles twice its size, it didn't just look like an off-roader, it was one. Journalists tested it against far larger machines and came away impressed, even embarrassed. The tiny Suzuki clambered up slopes that sent traction control systems on expensive SUVs into panic. In snow, sand, and slush, its lightweight became an advantage. It danced where others dug in. Its limitations, though, were clear. On highways, the same attributes that made it nimble off-road made it twitchy. Its 4-speed automatic held gears too long. Its short wheelbase bounced over expansion joints, and the steering demanded constant corrections. But those quirks gave it personality. In an age of algorithmic driving experiences, the Jimny made you drive. Every gust of wind and gradient change reminded you of physics, of mechanical reality, something modern vehicles try desperately to hide. Aftermarket tuners took the Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto and ran wild. Lift kits, wide arches, mini G-Wagon conversions, overlanding builds. It became a canvas for creativity. Suzuki didn't resist. It embraced the community. The factory even released special editions inspired by fan mods. In Japan, the Heritage Edition celebrated its lineage with retro decals and steel wheels. In Europe, accessories like roof racks, mud guards, and ladder kits became official options. The brand had unintentionally created not just a car, but a lifestyle platform. Motorsport played a quieter role, but a symbolic one. Privateers entered Jimnys in local rally raids and off-road challenges, where their agility and reliability earned respect. They weren't winning trophies against high-powered beasts, but they finished, consistently. That reliability became legend. Mechanics praised its accessibility. Owners called it indestructible. In a culture where vehicles are increasingly sealed boxes of electronics, the Jimny still invited you to pop the hood and tinker. For American enthusiasts, the Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto represented something tantalizingly out of reach. Suzuki no longer sold passenger vehicles in the US, leaving fans to drool over overseas videos and import restrictions. Online petitions begged for its return, and gray market importers began plotting for when the 25-year rule would make them legal. The buzz was proof that the spirit of simple off-roading still resonated deeply in a country once built on Jeeps and Broncos. Globally, the Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto became an icon of resistance to conformity. Its square profile turned heads not because it was flashy, but because it was fearless. In a sea of wind tunnel curves and marketing jargon, it stood like a brick of honesty. For every buyer tired of touchscreen lag or software updates, the Jimny offered relief. It wasn't perfect, but it was pure. Yet purity can be expensive to preserve. Emission standards tightened again, and Suzuki faced tough choices. Some markets received the Jimny only as a commercial van to meet fleet average requirements. Others saw limited allocations. Still, the waiting list never shortened. Demand stayed ferocious. Even used examples kept their value, defying the normal depreciation curve. The car that started as a budget 4x4 had become an investment piece. As time passed, the Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto evolved from a car you bought into a symbol you wore. It became shorthand for individuality in a homogenized world. Its very impracticality made it desirable. And in doing so, it revealed something profound about the automotive psyche. Maybe deep down, people don't crave perfection. They crave connection. The question now is what happens next. As electrification accelerates and software dominates, can the Jimny's analog spirit endure? Or will it become a fossil of freedom, admired but extinct? To answer that, we need to explore how its story doesn't end with its own generation, but echoes into what comes after, influencing how the world defines real driving in the age ahead. The Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto has already proven that small can still mean serious, but its real legacy lies in what it says about the future. As automakers race toward electrification and autonomy, the Jimny's analog defiance feels almost rebellious. It's the little square rebel that refuses to be digitized, and that refusal has made it immortal in a way few modern vehicles can claim. In a sense, the Jimny has become more than a car. It's a mirror, reflecting both our nostalgia for mechanical purity and our unease with how fast the automotive world is changing. When you drive the Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto, you instantly sense why it has endured. It's not the power, it's the honesty. Every vibration, every steering correction, every gear change reminds you that this is a conversation between human and machine. It demands skill, not because it's difficult, but because it's direct. There's no computer filtering your actions, no software smoothing the rough edges. You feel the suspension load up, hear the engine work, smell the earth after a muddy climb, and that sensory connection becomes addictive. In an era of digital disconnection, it feels revolutionary. That rawness is precisely what could define the next generation of enthusiasts. The Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto has sparked a quiet movement, a craving for vehicles that prioritize engagement over perfection. We're already seeing whispers of its influence in concept EVs that borrow its proportions, its upright stance, its emphasis on simplicity. Even as batteries replace engines, designers are taking cues from the Jimny's ethos. Less clutter, more character. Suzuki itself faces a fascinating challenge: how to translate the Jimny spirit into an electric age without losing its soul. If any brand can pull that off, it's the one that has spent half a century proving that minimalism can conquer mountains. Culturally, the Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto has also become a unifier. It bridges generations in a way few vehicles can. Older drivers love it for the nostalgia. It reminds them of a time when 4x4s were about exploration, not image. Younger buyers love it because it feels authentic, a real antidote to the sanitized driving experiences of today. It's the rare car that looks as good on a trail as it does parked outside a coffee shop, yet it doesn't feel like it's trying too hard. It just is that quiet confidence, that refusal to apologize for being small or simple, resonates deeply in a world that often mistakes excess for excellence. The Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto also teaches a broader lesson about restraint. Automotive history is filled with examples of overreach, vehicles that chased power, technology, or luxury until they collapsed under their own complexity. The Jimny went the other way. Its success is a reminder that clarity of purpose can be a superpower. When every decision flows from a single idea, make a small, tough, capable 4x4, the result feels inevitable. It's why the Jimny inspires such loyalty. People trust it. They know what it's for, and it delivers exactly that. No marketing spin required. That trust is rare today. Software glitches, overpromised range figures, hidden subscriptions. Modern vehicles are becoming less about driving and more about data management. Against that backdrop, the Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto feels like a time capsule of authenticity. It's not perfect, but it's predictable. It won't ghost update itself overnight or ask for a payment to unlock your seat heaters. It just starts, drives, and climbs like machines are supposed to. That reliability of experience, not just mechanics, is what gives it staying power. Even the criticisms have become part of the myth. Too small, too slow, too simple, yet those same traits have made it iconic. Because the Jimny was never designed to please everyone. It was designed to serve those who value the journey more than the destination. And in that sense, it's the purest expression of freedom left on four wheels. The Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto reminds us that adventure doesn't require horsepower. It requires intent. It shows that you don't need to dominate nature to experience it. You just need to meet it on its own terms. Collectors and enthusiasts have already begun preserving these models, aware that vehicles like this might not exist much longer. As emissions laws tighten and electrification becomes mandatory, the mechanical Jimny could become one of the last truly analog 4x4s ever built. Its simplicity ensures it will outlive many of the complex vehicles that replaced it. Years from now, when autonomous cars glide silently down regulated highways, somewhere in the distance you'll still hear the faint rumble of a Jimny's little four-cylinder climbing a mountain road. That image alone captures why it matters, but perhaps its greatest achievement is emotional. The Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto makes people smile, not because it's fast or fancy, but because it reminds them why they fell in love with driving in the first place. It strips away the noise and leaves only the essence: motion, freedom, discovery. It's not nostalgia for the past. It's a blueprint for how to preserve joy in the future. And that's the final truth of the Jimny. It's not the biggest, the fastest, or the most advanced, but it might just be the most human. That's why it endures, and why, even as the industry changes beyond recognition, the spirit of the Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto will keep finding new roads to conquer, one simple, determined climb at a time. For American viewers, the Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto represents the ultimate forbidden fruit, a vehicle that embodies everything many off-roaders claim to want, yet can't buy new on US soil. It's a paradox in metal, tiny but tough, modest yet magnetic. Its appeal isn't about numbers, it's about narrative. Here's a machine that delivers honesty in a market drowning in artifice. For anyone considering ownership, the story doesn't end at desire. It continues through import laws, practicality, and long-term value. The Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto can't be legally imported into the US until it's 25 years old, but that hasn't stopped enthusiasts from planning ahead. The 25-year rule means early units, those built in 2018, will become eligible in 2043. It sounds distant, but that only adds to the mystique. Meanwhile, Americans eager for the experience often look to used examples overseas or travel to drive them abroad. The common refrain after doing so is simple. No photo, no spec sheet, no review quite captures the feeling. The Jimny makes you laugh, sometimes curse, but always feel alive. From an ownership standpoint, it's refreshingly straightforward. The 1.5-liter four-cylinder engine is known for reliability, chain-driven, understressed, and easy to maintain. The 4-speed automatic is old school but bulletproof. Routine service costs are low, and mechanical access is excellent. Body panels bolt on, interiors clean up easily, and parts availability across global markets remain strong thanks to decades of shared architecture. For those planning future imports, rust protection and proper maintenance will be key. These vehicles age well if cared for, but their simplicity means they show neglect just as clearly. Pricing depends heavily on region, but the Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto holds its value astonishingly well. Even several years after release, used models often sell for more than their original MSRP, a testament to both demand and scarcity. It's not a vehicle that depreciates, it just migrates between owners who get it. That loyalty has turned the Jimny into an investment of emotion as much as money. It's a car you buy with your heart and keep with your hands. Reliability is rarely in question. Suzuki's decades of refining simple mechanical systems have created a machine that thrives on use, not pampering. There are no fragile air suspensions or finicky electronics waiting to fail. The trade-off, of course, is refinement. You'll hear the wind at highway speeds, feel every rut, and accept that the 4-speed auto will sometimes search for gears. But those quirks are features, not flaws. They remind you that driving is a sensory act. For US enthusiasts dreaming ahead, patience will be rewarded. Once the Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto clears import restrictions, it will arrive as a cultural artifact, a snapshot of a time when vehicles still had mechanical souls. Expect prices to stay firm, collector interest to spike, and aftermarket support to blossom as the model becomes legal. And even then, it won't be about profit or prestige. It will be about connection, to the road, to the landscape, to the simplicity we've lost along the way. The takeaway is clear. In a market chasing automation and luxury, this little 404 proves there's still a hunger for authenticity. It's a reminder that capability doesn't have to mean complication, and that charm can outlast technology. The Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto may be small, but its impact stretches far beyond its dimensions. It's a symbol of what driving used to be, and what it can still become. In the end, this isn't just a story about a car. It's about the courage to stay simple when the world demands complexity. The Jimny shows that adventure doesn't need reinvention, it just needs intention. And that's why years from now, when new technologies blur the lines between driver and machine, the Suzuki Jimny 1.5 SZ5 Auto will still stand as proof that sometimes the purest form of progress is standing still.